Good afternoon. Welcome to a virtual panel brought to you by the Nanovic Institute for European Studies from the University of Notre Dame. I'm delighted to welcome you to this event entitled Arabic for All. My name is Clement Sedmak, and I'm the Interim Director of the Nanovic Institute for European Studies. This is, as you can see, a virtual event, and we want to express our gratitude to our events and communication team for making this possible. Mel Webb, Grant Osborne, and Jen Lektansky. Thank you so much. The Nanovic Institute's mission is quite simple: to bring Europe to Notre Dame and to bring Notre Dame to Europe. When we bring Europe to Notre Dame, we bring the beauty and the pain, the problems and the ideas, the debates and the developments. Today's event is more about the problems and some pain, namely the challenge of linguistic taboos or linguistic discrimination. Today's session will be chaired by my colleague, Professor Sonja Stojanovic. Please allow me to introduce your chair, who will then introduce the other panelists. Sonja is a Nanovic faculty fellow and an assistant professor of French and Francophone studies with a concurrent faculty appointment in the Gender Studies program. Professor Stojanovic holds a PhD from Brown University, where research interests and areas of expertise include 20th and 21st century French and Francophone literatures, contemporary French culture, memory studies, gender studies, critical theory, migration, labor, and translation. She has also a long-standing interest in contemporary women's writing. In 2020, she published a great article, Should the Subaltern Clean?, which also discusses aspects of linguistic discrimination. It discusses the role of the cleaning lady in contemporary French fiction, including the politics of their naming. I found this article fascinating. Sonja, thank you so much for this. The relationship between language and politics is of great interest for the Nanovic Institute, where we explore, among other things, the intersection of humanities and policy. Dear Sonja, thank you so much for bringing this panel to the University of Notre Dame and the Nanovic Institute for European Studies. And thank you so much for chairing this event. Please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clemens, for this introduction and this unexpected introduction. I only gave a few sentences, but you added a lot, so thanks. Thank you also to the Nanovic Institute for hosting this conversation. And it is my great pleasure today to introduce our two guests. Nabil Wakim is joining us from Paris, France, and we just found out that the curfew is about to begin, so we're happy he's here with us. And he'll be joining us to talk about his recent book, L'Arabe pour tous, Arabic for All, Why My Language Is Taboo in France. Nabil is a journalist for the French newspaper Le Monde, where he currently covers the energy and climate sector after being web editor-in-chief as well as political editor. He also teaches at the Sciences Po Journalism School in Paris. Nabil was born in Beirut, Lebanon in 1981, and he arrived in France in 1985. In his book, he recounts the loss of Arabic and his attempts to relearn it as an adult, notably in 2015 at Harvard University, the year he was a Nieman Foundation Fellow. During this time, he sat in an Arabic course every day from 9 to 10 a.m. in the coldest of New England winters. This is an experience many of our students can relate to. But Nabil's book is not only a reflection on his personal experiences, but it is also an inclusion of interview with many French politicians, journalists, artists, researchers, and teachers on the topic of their own relationship to Arabic. One word that comes up frequently in this book and in these conversations, and I counted 47 instances of it, is the word honte, shame. It is a word and a feeling that are intimately linked to the ascribed or perceived value of Arabic in the French context. France is a country that sees itself as monolingual. It has a long history of suppressing regional languages and dialects. Even though Arabic is the second most spoken language in France, it is barely taught in schools, and the numbers have only decreased in the past 20 years. As Nabil discusses in his book, the teaching of Arabic, the speaking of Arabic, even the reading of Arabic books in the metro are met with fear. Arabic is not seen as a language for itself or in itself with a long and rich history, but rather hastily assimilated to religion and seen solely as a language of Islam. In February 2020, French President Emmanuel Macron alluded to the importance of teaching Arabic in French schools in a context overseen by the Ministry of National Education. As he discusses in his book, this is not a new proposal in itself, but it is made in the context of what has been termed the fight against Islamist separatism. There is this fear that French values of universalism and laïcité or secularism are under attack. In a more recent speech made on October 2nd, 2020, Macron proposes to expand the teaching of Arabic and gives as a reason the following, and I quote, "If we do not teach it in schools or as an extracurricular activity that is consistent with the Republic's laws, we have to accept that more than 60,000 young people will learn it through community or religious associations that offer the teaching of this language with the worst of motives in mind," end quote. Nabil's book allows us to mull over these recent debates on the teaching of Arabic in schools, something to be celebrated even as we acknowledge where this stems from. We're also allowed a space in this book to explore paradoxical feelings with regard to the choice we as individuals make when it comes to the languages that we inherit and those we transmit or choose not to. This is also a joyful book with a number of anecdotes and situations many readers can relate to. What this book makes us think about is the relationship that we each have to the languages that we speak, the languages that we are learning, the languages that we wish we spoke, or the languages that we may have forgotten. Many of us present here today are students of quote unquote foreign languages or professors of foreign languages. We may also be multilingual by the accidents of our birth or where our family was born, and we may share these struggles with these languages that are ours. Nabil's book reminds us that even though these struggles are not often publicly addressed, many share these questionings. And I hope that today will not only allow us to think about France, but also about our own relationships to the languages that surround us. Nabil will be led in conversation by Dan Maroon, who teaches French at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Dan's research is informed by the intersection of gender and sexuality with Francophone communities, primarily in North Africa and the Levant. Dan and I thought that since Nabil is a journalist, it would be productive to turn the tables and have him answer some questions for a change. Following their conversation, there will be time for questions from the audience, and you can use the Q&A function on your screen to ask them. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you again to our guests. Dan, Nabil, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Sonia, for that amazing introduction, and also a heartfelt look at what this book talks about, to what a lot of us can relate to in terms of what Sonia said, a quote unquote foreign language and our relationship to it. But in this particular circumstance, this is Nabil's native tongue, which he talks about so often in the book. Nabil, we'd like to start off with just one of the larger questions. And that is, do you mind elaborating more on the relationship between Arabic and France for those of us who don't have the European context in mind?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you all for listening to us. It's the evening now in Paris, and it's the curfew because of the pandemic. So I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk to you about this topic that matters to me very much. So thank you all for organizing this. So Dan, the topic of Arabic in France is, as Sonia said it very well, it's a very complex issue, but it's kind of ironic. Arabic in France is the second most spoken language in the country. You have 4 million people who speak Arabic in France on a population of about 66 million. So that's a lot. But at the same time, it's one of the least taught languages in schools. You have 0.2% of students in high school studying Arabic. And so it shows that it's a kind of a strange story. And of course, this goes to the French history and the complicated relationship France has to, especially Northern Africa, which was a French colony for years, but also the Middle East, where there was a very strong French presence for years. So the book, so it's called in French L'Arabe pour tous, which translates strangely in English to me as Arabic for all. It's kind of a pun in French, so it doesn't really work in English. But basically, it's my story. So the story of a kid who was born in Lebanon, and when my parents came to France, I was 4 years old, and at the time I spoke Arabic. It was my native language. And somehow between my 4 and my 40 years old, I lost Arabic on the road. And so I wanted to reflect on that and to think, okay, is this my problem? Is this because I'm lazy and I don't want to learn? Is this because of my parents? Because somehow it's always because of your parents, everything. Or is it because of the situation in France, the monolingualism, as Sonia said it, because the French language has a very strong presence in the French Republic. So I wanted to think a lot about that. And so I wrote about my story, but I tried to make it also a journalistic investigation about what is the situation with the French, or the Arabic language in France. And so, yes, to go back to your question, there is this strange situation where a lot of people have a very strong relationship with the Arabic language in France, but it doesn't exist in public spaces. It almost doesn't exist in schools. And it's a topic of very strong political controversies very often. And it has been more and more during the last 10 years.
What in particular about Arabic, and I know that you talk about this in your book, what is it about Arabic in particular, or the idea of learning Arabic as opposed to some of the other languages that you mentioned, like Russian and Chinese, that is of particular anti-republicanism, as you might think?
So there are two things. The general idea is that France is very about the French language. If you compare it to the US, France has an official language. It's French, and it has been so for the last 500 years. And so there is this very strong idea that French people speak French. And they do speak French very well. Unfortunately, they don't speak so-called foreign languages very well. And so the French school system is very good on many ways, but it's not good at teaching foreign languages generally. And it's especially bad at teaching immigrant languages. And this is what we're talking about. Arabic in France is seen, the perception of Arabic is that it's seen as an immigrant language. And so immigrants in France, especially coming from Northern Africa or the Middle East, have come during the 50s, the 60s, the 70s to work in the factories of France after the Second World War. There were poor people with large families living in the suburbs, and the suburbs in France is like the opposite of the suburbs in the US, right? It's like underprivileged neighborhoods, and people with low income, not very long studies. And so, yeah, there is this idea that Arabic is the language of the poor and the underprivileged. And so this has been true for a very long time. And at the same time, during more recently, especially during the last 10 years, was the topic of global terrorism. And as I'm sure you know, there has been a lot of attacks recently in France, and especially in Paris in 2015. There have been the Charlie Hebdo attacks, the Bataclan attacks, and other terrorist attacks in France. And so the debate became very heated about integration, about Islam in France. And this debate, and I know it's the case also in other Western countries, and it was the case also in the US, turned out to be a very racist debate with a lot of derogatory things said on TV, on live TV about immigrants. And in this debate, there was this idea that the Arabic language is by essence linked to Islam, and that if you speak Arabic, you're a Muslim, and if you're a Muslim, then you must be somehow linked to terrorism. And so these racist and discriminatory ideas are very strong in the French society, and the education system is not immune to this kind of thinking. And so I have seen while writing my books that in some schools, in some high school, some teachers didn't want to have Arabic in the high schools where they teach, because they were like, well, what kind of people will we be having in our school? Which is, of course, kind of crazy when you think about it, but I think it's very much the case. And a lot of reactions I had after publishing the book were this type of reactions. First, we're in France, we speak French, so what are you talking about? And second, well, people speaking Arabic are bad people, basically.
Do you feel, speaking of the school system, and I have two questions on this, but the first one is, do you feel as though this anti-communitarianism is unique to Arabic, or do you feel foreign language, quote unquote, in general in the French education system or in French society?
Well, I think both are true. So generally, the French society is very different than the American societies. There is not the same sense of communities building a nation. So the idea of the French nation has been, well, we're all members of the French nation, so there is no difference, race, religion, gender, blah, blah, blah. It's all the same. And this has been the idea since the French Revolution. And it's very strong, especially in the political parties, unions have this idea in a very strong way. So the idea of communities in France is seen as somehow anti-Republican because it would divide the nation. And I know it's not easy for Americans to see it this way, or not to see it as directly a racist thing, but it's just different. It's just different. It's not necessarily discriminatory, but it's really different. And then you have something specific with the Arabic language because of what I said just before, because of the links that's made between the Arabic language and Islam, and of course because of what happened during the last years in French, which has no connection with Arabic. While writing my book, I looked at who were the terrorists of the last terrorist attacks in France, and none of them actually spoke Arabic. So it is not. And the last horrendous murder that happened in France, which was the murder of a French teacher, and it was a very emotional moment in France because it was a very serious moment. Well, the murderer was born in Moscow, but even after that, some French politicians said, well, look at them. They kill our teachers and we want to teach Arabic. Of course, it's totally unrelated, but it shows you a little bit of what the debate is made of.
Do you feel, speaking of the French education system, because in your book, you, and Sonia mentions this, you discuss the French education system and the need for more Arabic instruction in the school. Here, comparatively in the US, there isn't that idea that we shouldn't teach a foreign language. I mean, we know that Spanish and French are our two top languages in the education system. It is shocking, obviously, for a non-European or a non-French person to hear that Arabic, being the largest spoken language outside of French, inside of France, not being taught. What sort of solutions does integrating it into the curriculum propose, in your opinion?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. You have a lot of kids who are sons or daughters of immigrants coming from the Arab world. They don't speak Arabic very well. They hear it sometimes in their houses, but they don't speak it very well. For most of them, this language has no value because what they know of, what I know of, I can speak with you today in English. I couldn't do that in Arabic, which is kind of crazy because I was born speaking that language. And because the Arabic we know of is an Arabic that works in our house. I know in Arabic how to say, well, please, where's the hummus? Yeah. But that doesn't get you a job. That doesn't help you to read a poet or see a movie. And so I guess it would be a great opportunity for all these students, all these young people who are French. They are French citizens, but they share multiple identities. They're French, they're Algerian, Moroccan, Lebanese, Syrians, whatever. But so the idea would be the French education system could be the place where they learn not only French, but also Arabic. And so they will also learn something about their cultural heritage. Because as you know, here at the Nanovic Institute, I'm sure better than anyone, like learning a language is not just learning words or sentences. It's learning culture. It's learning what people share, the way they live. It's meeting people, traveling, and all of that. I think would be a great opportunity for a lot of people coming from the Arab world. I have to say that after writing the book, I received a lot of letters from people who don't speak Arabic, but who are from different immigration origin. People from Spanish sons of Spanish immigrants, sons of Italian immigrants, of Polish immigrants, who also said, well, with the process of the French assimilation system, we lost our language in my family. My grandfather was Polish, but he didn't want to speak Polish with us because it was not the best way to find a way in the French society. And I think that's the most important point, and that's what we're talking about. It's not only about the French society or the French public school system telling kids do not speak Arabic. It's also that immigrant families themselves, like my family did, well, they do not, I mean, and that's not always conscious, but they say to themselves, well, maybe that's not a very good bet. I don't want my kids to learn Arabic because that's not the priority. In the books, I interviewed the former education minister. She's from a Moroccan family, and herself, she studied German and English at school, but she did not study Arabic, and she doesn't speak Arabic now. And she was born in a Moroccan family. And I guess that's one very interesting point. And I guess there are bridges to that in other Western countries and also in the US, like the strategies of the families and the parents in what languages they give to their kids is also related to the values these languages have in society.
Very, very true. And there's a couple comments there. The first one would be that what's remarkable about your book is that it reaches across the aisle. And what we mean by that is that it is able to talk to so many people's experiences in their own relationships with language and their own diasporic relationship with language, whether it be from their family as well. Paradoxically speaking, though, Arabic seems to be quite popular in a bourgeois setting. You talk about, the more prestigious universities having a large representation of Arabic language learners. Do you mind talking about that? Because the simple fact of the matter is you've mentioned the French suburbs, les banlieues, and that's where we see the largest concentrations of potential Arabophone. So do you mind unpacking a little bit more about why Arabic has a sort of elevated status amongst higher socioeconomic individuals or students at more prestigious universities?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And I kind of discovered that while writing the book. Arabic has in France this kind of double identity. I talked about the sons of and daughters of immigrants, but it is absolutely true that it has been, and for a very long time in France, also a language that was learned by the elite. Also because French had this very great colonial empire, and so a lot of people were diplomats going there to work, and so they had to learn Arabic. And so there is this very strong school in France of teachers of Arabic, translators, journalists, diplomats. In fact, in the newspaper where I work, I have colleagues who are reporters on the international desk, and they speak way better Arabic than me. But the point is, most of these people are not from Arabic descent, which is fine. But it's also interesting to see that when Arabic is spoken by people who have no connection whatsoever to the Arab world, it's fine for them to learn it. It's seen as an opportunity, an openness, but it's not the same when you're yourself an immigrant. And in the book, I interview a sociologist who's a teacher at Sciences Po in Paris, which is a very elite school, and she is from Moroccan descent. And she said, well, one day some of my students said, well, we have to leave earlier from the class today because we have to go to the Arabic class. And she was like, well, that's strange. Like, they all have very French names. They look very French and they're learning Arabic. So somehow Arabic must have value. And so it's interesting to see, and this is true for Arabic, but it's true for any language, really. Like, it's very political, and the value we give to a language is very political, and it differs from your social origin in a society, and that still is very true today. If you consider it, like, one of the closest counselor of the French president Emmanuel Macron is a very good Arabic speaker, and he was the French ambassador in many Arab countries. So that's kind of the irony of it, I guess.
Coming back to this concept of language as politics, as you had just mentioned, do you believe, and coming back to the concept of Islamophobia, what are the ties to language and the perceptions of language and the recent rises in nationalism, either in France or across Europe, in particular Italy or even Spain as well? Do you see any sort of relationship between the two?
That's a tough question, Dan. I don't know. I would say maybe the other way around. I think conservatives and the far right use the topic of language to fuel Islamophobia and to fuel their view of the world, which is in France what they called le grand remplacement, which is a baseless concept saying that people from Africa and the Arab world are changing France to make it a different country, like almost as if there was a secret plan. And so so they use language as a tool in their box of tools of whatever they can use for their agenda. But I don't think there's much reality to that, because the true reality of the Arabic language in France is most people from Arabic descent, they do not speak it correctly. And most immigrant families, they do not transmit it very well to their kids, simply because there is no institution. The education system is not well made for that. And so the fears they have, I think, is mostly a political tool, but it's a very efficient tool. It works pretty well with the idea that the conversation about learning more Arabic in school would be an illustration of the threat to the French nation. If I may add something, there is this very old idea in France that the French language is in danger. And it's not only about Arabic. The English language is often seen as a threat to the French language. And this has been the case in history for the last maybe 100 years. It comes maybe from the fact that at some point in history, a long time ago, France was the dominant language in Europe, and so seen as the dominant language in the world. And so there is this idea that French is losing ground to English, to Arabic, to any other language. And so this is a very popular opinion in France, and it's very hard to deconstruct it.
Yeah. I mean, that you really are unearthing a large sociological problem, sociocultural problem there, aren't you? To what degree does the concept of transmission come up when you're talking in particular about losing your language? You brought up transmission, you brought up about learning culture, and you talk in particular about being a parent as well. How does this language or this lack of language affect you in your transmission of being born in Beirut and having an Arab childhood?
Well, that's very important to me. When I was a kid, I was really ashamed of the Arabic language. I didn't want my parents to speak it. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to go on holidays to Lebanon. And I had this very problematic relationship with the language. And then I grew up, I became a journalist, and suddenly I was like, well, maybe I missed this huge opportunity in my life to understand Arabic. I wanted to go to the Arab world. I as a reporter, I went to many Arab countries, and I'm unable to speak Arabic to people, which is ridiculous when you think about it. And then, as you said, I myself had a daughter, and she's 6 now. And when she was born, I was like, well, I love her to speak Arabic. That's important to me. I want her to have an Arab first name. I want her to know this part of her history, because it's also a part of her history, because it's my history too. And then I realized it's very hard to teach a language that you don't speak yourself. So as many Arab men do, I tried to convince my mom to do it, which was complete failure. And then and then I wrote this book instead of teaching her anything. So I no, but seriously, I think this is a very interesting topic when you talk about immigration, because first generation immigrants, they don't necessarily have the conscience of that. They come for economic or political or social reasons. They do their stuff, then they have kids. And these kids, like me, we grew up in this country. I am French, and I'm very completely well in France. I love France. I'm very French in many ways. I'm very comfortable in France, but I'm also Lebanese. And so I want to have this both of these cultures living in me and in my family. I want my daughter to like Lebanese food, to listen to Arab music, and to understand some of it. And then she'll choose whatever she wants to do, if she cares about it or not when she grows up. But I want to give her this ability to do it. But the difficult thing is my connection to Lebanese is fading. And so I guess it's the case for many immigrant families, second, third generation of immigrants who have kids and who are struggling with this question.
Mm. Going back to, and for you, you'd argue that language instruction is a way for them to reconnect, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I do think and it's not only about language. I mean, the goal would not be to have all these people speaking Arabic, of course, but, and there are very concrete examples of that in the books. There is in Paris, a great museum that's called Institut du Monde Arabe. So it's the Institute of the Arab World. And it's a great place. And it turns out the people who go there, most of them have no connection to the Arab world in their family. And so some teachers, they make the effort to bring their class, and not necessarily the Arabic class. Maybe sometimes it's a math teacher or a history teacher. And they go to this place and they show to these kids that the Arab world has history, that the Arabic language has value. And this culture is not... it's not only what you see in bad TV shows and live TV debates. It has more to give you, and a lot of teachers told me, well, it's a very emotional moment, because it's like these kids are maybe 14, 15 years old, and they suddenly understand something about their own history. And so I think it's a good thing for individuals, but also as a society, I think it's very powerful, because it means better citizens. If you understand better where you're coming from, then you can give more to society and share with other people.
Is the issue with Arabic an issue with France's model of republicanism and citizenship, or an issue with immigrant populations privileging integration and assimilation more so than linguistic transmission?
Well, I'd say it goes together. So the French model is really assimilation, and it has been like that since the French Revolution. You come here, you're welcome, you're French, we're all French, it's all the same. And so there is this very strong idea of assimilation. And some people said that to me after I published the book, and said, well, my family, we were from Eastern Europe, and we forgot everything. Now we're just French, and we're very happy about it. So the question is, should we do that to become French? And the reason why in the book I interviewed a lot of people like politicians, artists, journalists, people who are well known, is that because one of the hypotheses I had about myself is, did I make it in the media world, in like one of the biggest newspaper in France, because I did not speak Arabic? So the idea is it a trade-off? Like you have to not speak Arabic in order to have a good career being from Arab descent? And so this, I think, is a very strong interrogation to the French model of integration. How can we do that in order to have people understanding how France works? And it doesn't work like in the Arab world or in the US or any other country. France is very specific when it comes to a lot of things. So how can you integrate that without losing your culture and your identity? What's the balance point between the two? That's a very difficult debate. But at the end of the day, I'm very optimistic. The state of the conversation now is horrendous. It is very racist. That's just my opinion, but I think it is. But society is changing. People are getting married with people coming from different countries. Their kids are growing up, learning many languages, traveling around the world. And I see it with all the emails I got after publishing the books coming from a lot of people who are from diverse families. And so the French society is changing, and it's changing very quickly. It's just that I guess politicians, and I guess also a lot of business leaders don't see it yet. But it's changing. I'm optimistic.
That's awesome to hear. The question then, and this might be outside of your realm of expertise, but do you feel Arabic has the same sort of status, and you alluded to this in your previous answer, across Western European countries, or is this a unique phenomenon to France?
Well, I think there are, the stereotype of Arabic being a language of, threat because of Islamic terrorism. This is, I guess, widely spread in Europe. But it is also true to say that many European countries have more openness to plurilingualism. Because in a lot of European countries, like say Spain, Germany, Austria, the Scandinavian countries, people are, the UK, different languages exist, and they exist even in the constitution of these countries. And so it's easier for them to integrate the idea of different languages. In a country like Sweden, for example, it's way easier to learn Arabic or Turkish or any other immigrant languages than it is in France. So I think there is a specific relationship that France has because of what we said before, the colonial era, the idea that the French Republic is built around the French language.
All along this discussion that we've been having, you've mentioned the people that you've interacted with, a lot of individual artists, people in the media as well, former educational secretaries and ministers. Do you feel some of the remarks you make in the book or the conclusions you draw would have changed if you didn't interview this sort of milieu and you maybe went into the banlieue? You went into the suburbs to interview first generation or second generation speakers?
Yes, maybe, because my angle, the way I wanted to approach this issue was also, like I said, is the Arabic language something that allows you, is this an opportunity or is this a problem if you want to have a career, if you want to be seen, to be well known in the French society? And so, yes, I guess I would have had different answers talking to a different type of persons, but I don't think it would have changed the global analysis. And I'm comfortable with that because, again, I had a lot of interactions after the book was published in October with a lot of different people. And I realized it was the case all across the board, that it was not only a social question, that it was really as we don't like to say it in France, it was a race issue, an origin issue. Like, people coming from the Arab world have this very difficult relationship with the language. If I may add something, is that the Arabic language itself is a complicated language because you don't speak the same Arabic in Lebanon or in Morocco. And the Arabic we teach in French schools is what we call modern standard Arabic. So it's an Arabic that literally no one talks on a daily basis. So it makes things complicated because if you're a second generation immigrant and you hear Moroccan Arabic at home, the Arabic you're going to learn at school is not the same. And so this adds, if I can say things like this, yes, it adds a layer of difficulty to this specific debate.
It adds a layer of apprehension. It adds a layer, not just simply difficult. Yeah, it just makes, and it foreignizes even more the learning process for the individual. Because as you talk about so often in your book, you're learning Arabic, but it's not an Arabic that might be useful for you.
Yes, and actually that's what happened to me when I was a fellow at Harvard for a year, and I studied Arabic there, as Sonia mentioned, and it was strange for me, but in a way it was easier for me to learn this modern standard Arabic in English because it was a very foreign language to me. So I learned a lot of modern standard Arabic. Turns out you can't use it in your everyday life.
It makes all those cold mornings worth it, as Sonia was saying.
Oh.
Thank you so much. I'm elated. I'm going to let Sonia take over for a moment.
Thank you both, Nabil and Dan, for this wonderful conversation. I just want to open up the floor for questions from the audience. You can use the Q&A function on your screen. And as I'm waiting for the questions to roll in, I'll perhaps start with a question myself, even though it is Nanovic tradition to ask the first question from a student. So as we're waiting for the official first question, I'll just ask a bridge one. I wanted to talk about the end of the book where you talk about Arab France, or la France arabe, and the idea that perhaps Arabic can be one of the languages of France, something that would be some cultural heritage that belongs to everyone. I was wondering if you think that hyphenated identities, in the way that we think of them, perhaps in the American context, where you can be Irish American, African American, Asian American, if this is something that could perhaps happen in France, even though it is a country that prizes universalism and wants to see people without hyphenated identities. Is the end of your book arguing for the possibility of hyphenated identities in France?
Thank you, Sonia. I think that's a very relevant question. And of course, I don't have all the answers. It's a very difficult debate in France with very strong positions. I try to be simple about it and to say, well, you can be French and something else, and that's fine. And that works for a language, an ethnic identity, or whatever works for you. And so I guess the idea is to make this less of, how can I say that in English? of a debate under pressure. The problem of this debate is that you can't talk about it because immediately the debate is taken hostage by the most radical elements of the conservative side, saying that, well, this is a threat to the French identity, so we can't talk about it. There was this anecdote after France won the World Cup in 2018. So the French soccer team is like a national treasure to us, but it's also very diverse. And so there was this Trevor Noah on his show. He said, well, why can't you be like French and Senegalese and French and Algerian and French and this and that? And it was a national controversy in France. Like, no one watches Trevor Noah in France ever. He's not known at all. But suddenly it became a very strong controversy because someone said that these French football players, soccer players, they were not only French, they were French and something else. And some of them had to issue statements to say, no, we're just French, because they were afraid of having this hyphenated identity, as you said. And so again, I think that society is changing. People have already multiple identities. It's a fact. This is how people live. They share different identities, and it's great. The problem is it's difficult to talk about it in a calm and factual way. That's the problem we have, I guess.
Thank you. So we have a question from a student who's asking, in my Russian course, many students are training for the army and may have a subconscious motive from learning the Russian language, which is to prepare them for combat or counterintelligence. Do you think that the integration of Arabic in France would be enough, or does it have to be taught in a way that emphasizes culture and to showcase Arabic as more than a quote-unquote enemy language?
It's interesting. Thank you for this question, because when I was at Harvard, I studied Arabic with undergrads, and some of them were studying Arabic as an enemy language. They were like, well, I want to be in the army, I want to work in intelligence agencies, and so I want to speak. And I was like, wow, it's like Russian, maybe years ago, or maybe it still is the case now, as you say. This is still true in France today, and there has been many times people in the army or the intelligence agencies saying we don't have enough people speaking Arabic, which is kind of funny when you think about it. I mean, also it's not funny, but it's ironic, I would say, because it's also Arabic seen as a way to fight for the Republic. And so this would be a good argument, I guess, for some people to say, well, we should teach Arabic more. And then to the second point of your question, yes, I think the way Arabic is teaching in French high schools now is pretty good, because it's pretty open to the different cultures of the Arab world. And I had many people who I talked to for the book saying, well, the moment I had the opportunity to take this class, I discovered that Arabic was not only what's in my family, that there were like Palestinian poet like Mahmoud Darwish, that there were like famous Egyptian movies that I really liked. And so, yeah, that is not only what my father and my mother tell me to come quick because it's time to have dinner. And so, yes, I guess it's pretty good. The problem is it's not large enough. It's not towards a larger enough public.
Thank you. I had several questions about which Arabic to teach. So the idea that perhaps secular Arabic or l'arabe laïque or Fusha, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is something that would be safe to be taught in French schools, but not classical Arabic. This is a question from a linguistic anthropologist, and I don't know if you can speak to the tension between the type of Arabic that is taught.
So there's kind of a confusion that people make about the Arabic language. So yes, the Arabic language is the language of the Quran, which is the holy book for Muslims. But the language of the Quran is, I mean, you can't go buy bread with the language of the Quran. So the very classical Arabic of the Quran is taught in mosques to people who want to learn religion or want to learn the Quran. But it's not what we teach in classic. The Fusha, or modern standard Arabic, it's usually MSA. It's the modern Arabic. It's the Arabic that you hear on TVs like Al Jazeera or Al Arabiya. It's what you will see in newspapers in the Arab world. So it's a normal language. I mean, it has no. It's strange to say a normal language. How can I say that? People often think that this language, because it's sometimes called literary Arabic, is a religious language. It is not. It's a language that people can use in business, in culture, in whatever they want to, I don't know, to have friends, meet people, love, whatever. And then you have what is sometimes referred to as dialects, which is the Moroccan Arabic, Lebanese Arabic, Algerian Arabic, and you can have very strong differences. I can understand, even not completely, but I can understand a Lebanese or a Syrian person speaking. If I go to Morocco, which happens to me, and I have a lot of Moroccan friends, I don't understand anything because words are very different. The way to pronounce letters are different. Some letters you use in Lebanon, you don't use in Morocco. And so there are very strong differences. And so to go back to your question, there has been a strong debate in France 20 years ago about what Arabic should we teach in schools. And some teachers, some linguists, because a lot of French, a lot of immigrants were coming from Northern Africa, they were like, well, we should teach the Arabic of Algeria or Morocco, basically, because this is their native language and it would be easier for them. And so there was this debate, and the education minister at the time decided otherwise. And he said, well, no, we should teach Arabic as a universal language and give it as a tool to everybody. And so behind that, there is this idea that learning Arabic is not only for people from Arabic descent, it's for everybody. And we should be willing to have people who are called Paul Martin and coming from the Loir-et-Cher, which is a rural region of France, and wanting to learn Arabic as they might want to learn, I don't know, Serbian or Chinese or Portuguese or whatever makes them happy. And so there is this idea that modern standard Arabic, teaching modern standard Arabic is a way to normalize Arabic, to teach it as a language as any other.
Thank you. I have several questions that talk about other minority languages, such as perhaps Vietnamese or Breton or Basque. And do you have a sense of what, if there's any commonalities between these communities and the teaching of these languages, and if there is perhaps some way of these different communities coming together in order to enact some change in the teaching of these languages?
Thank you. Fascinating questions. First, about Vietnamese, there's a strong Vietnamese community in France, and there is also a colonial history between Southeast Asia and France. But there is almost no Vietnamese taught in French school. The Vietnamese community is better than the Arabic, the immigrants coming from the Arab world, transmitting the language inside the families, but they don't advocate, at least not publicly, to have it teach in schools. And I guess one of the reasons is that they don't think they would win. They don't think they would convince anyone to have Vietnamese classes in schools, which is kind of crazy. In the neighborhood where I live in Paris, which is a very diverse neighborhood, there's a very strong Vietnamese communities. It never occurred to anyone to write something in Vietnamese in public schools where a lot of kids are coming from Vietnamese background. So yes, I guess there are strong analogies. There's a French Vietnamese journalist that's a good friend of mine who wrote a little bit about it after I published a book, and she made a very insightful analogies, I guess. Then regional languages in France like Basque and Breton, the story is a little bit different. So these are languages that has been marginalized by the French Republic. So the building of the French Republic after the French Revolution, and especially during the Third Republic, so that's at the beginning of the 20th century, basically, the idea was everybody has to speak French. This is the guarantee of the French unity, is we all speak French. And so teachers were sent to rural areas to marginalize these languages. But most of it, and this is where there's an interesting analogy with, I guess, Arabic, is that families themselves were ashamed of these languages because they were seen as languages of poor people, of peasants, of people who did not rise at the top of society. And so, yeah, this is, I guess, an interesting analogy, and it's coming back now that third generation of Breton or Basque speakers are trying to take over these languages. And the last point, are all these people uniting together, working together to make things change? The answer is very simple. It's no. There is no such thing as communities in France, and even less communities working together. And I don't think this would be a very efficient way to do it, because it would be seen by many people in France as attacking the Republic, the unity of the Republic. And so maybe it would be more interesting to work from inside the institutions. I don't know.
It might be counterproductive. So there's a question that deals with the legacies of colonialism. In Nancy Vieilleville, there's a street that is called Rue du Mort qui Trompe. Is there a movement to destroy such markers that are semiotic of racism and anti-multiculturalism?
So just to translate, so the name of the street, I did not know about it. Thank you for this question. Le Mort, the Mort in French is a very old and derogatory way to talk about Arabs in the medieval times. And so Le Mort qui Trompe would be the Arab from medieval times that will fool you. And so I did not know of that street. there is now the beginning of a conversation in France about changing names or places that are connected to the darkest places of our history. But of course, there is no consensus about that. It's more about slavery than it is about the Northern Africa, and of course about the Algeria War. But there is a conversation about it. There has been, especially last year, a conversation about Colbert, which is a very strong historical figure in the French Renaissance. And he was also the one who wrote the Code Noir, which defined slavery in the French way. And he still has, in the French National Assembly, there's a big room called the Room Colbert. And so there has been a conversation about, should we change the name? But up to now, we're not changing anything. So the conversation, I guess, is just starting, but it will be more and more present in the next years. I'm sure of that.
Thank you. Perhaps one final question to think a bit about your own writing in this book, and also as a journalist, how do you envision what you've done contributing to the conversation, and perhaps also how has writing this book changed how you think about this topic?
Thank you. That's an interesting question, because I sometimes said to myself while writing this book that it's kind of a coming out. It's kind of a way for me to say to people that know me, but also my colleagues in my newspaper, hey, I'm coming from Lebanon. I'm an Arab, and I guess for a very long period of my life. I mean, very long. I'm not that old. Come on. I mean, for some time in my life, I did not refer to myself as an Arab. It was something I avoided. When I started becoming a journalist, I didn't want to cover topic related to immigration or anything related to the Arab world. At the same time, I was an avid reader of everything related to the Middle East, and I watched every last single documentary on the Lebanese civil war. But I saw no contradiction in that. And I guess the book helped me to reunite the different parts of me and to say, well, hey, I'm French, I'm Arab. I want these things to work together. And I want us as people in France to have a conversation, a decent conversation about it, not a polarized, stupid, live TV debate conversation about it, a real grown-up conversation about it. Can we do that? And so, yes, it helped me a lot to synthesize that. And I guess it helped me, and that's a very important thing to me. It helped me to understand that it's not because I don't speak Arabic the same way as my grandmother did that I don't speak Arabic at all. It helped me to, I don't know, appreciate maybe what I have. The bad Arabic that I speak, well, it's my Arabic after all, and it's mixed of French, it's mixed of English, it's mixed of anything else, but it's still good as it is. And I guess that's helpful. I hope that's helpful to some others who read the book to reconcile the different languages they have and to understand that being bilingual or trilingual or speaking many languages doesn't mean speaking them in the same way. I don't speak English the same way I speak French or I speak Spanish, and even less Arabic. I'm not exactly the same person. I don't use it for the same reasons in my life, and that's fine. And so, yeah, writing this book helped me a lot with that.
Perfect. Those are really wonderful words to end the conversation with.
Yes.
An idea of how to think ourselves about the languages that we speak. Thank you so much, Nabil. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. To everyone who sent in questions, and we're sorry if we didn't have time to answer them all, but we invite you to read the book, and perhaps one day it'll be translated into English, so it's widely available here too. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.